I stood there in the middle of a world I had never truly belonged to. My name is Clark Miller, 28 years old, a regular warehouse worker from California, and today was supposed to be my wedding day. This five-star hotel was so dazzling it left me breathless. Crystal chandeliers sparkling like thousands of fallen stars hanging from the ceiling, casting light over 500 guests. Business tycoons, politicians, and the elite of high society. They laughed and chatted loudly, clinking champagne glasses, talking about stocks, yachts, and vacations in Europe. I was wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo, forcing a smile onto my face, but inside I was a bundle of nerves. This was my wedding to Lacey Ellington, daughter of one of the wealthiest families around, and I knew full well that I was just an ordinary guy who had somehow slipped into their world. My heart pounded as I scanned the crowd, searching for a familiar face among this sea of strangers. And then I saw him. My father, Benson Miller, 61 years old, walking in through a side door. He was wearing the same old suit I remembered him buying more than 10 years ago. His worn leather shoes cracked and scuffed, his thin frame slightly stooped as if trying to make himself smaller. He stood quietly in a far corner near the emergency exit, like he was afraid of disturbing anyone. His face was weathered from years of hard labor, but his eyes shone with a mixture of pride and anxiety. My dad had raised me single-handedly after Mom passed away. He worked himself to the bone on our little farm so I could get a decent education. He never complained once. But today, in the middle of all this luxury, he looked heartbreakingly out of place. My throat tightened, dry and aching. A wave of love and pain washed over me. I wanted to run to him right then, pull him into a proper seat in the family section. "Dad, why are you standing there all alone?" I thought, my heart twisting. He had sacrificed so much for me. He deserved respect. But before I could move, people started noticing. Whispers rippled through the crowd like an undercurrent. A group of women in glittering evening gowns turned to look, smirking. "Who's that? Looks like he just walked off a farm," one whispered, loud enough for me to hear. Fingers-pointed eyes judged him like he was some strange object that had wandered into their elite party. I felt the blood rush to my face, burning hot. They were mocking my father, the man who taught me how to be decent. My father-in-law-to-be, Brantley Ellington, chairman of the massive Ellington Group empire, stood not far away. He glanced at my dad with open disdain, as if looking at an insect. Then he turned away, shaking his head in annoyance, and went back to chatting with the senator as if nothing had happened. I clenched my fists, fighting the anger rising inside me. Brantley had never approved of this marriage. He always saw me as beneath them, only fit to run errands. My mother-in-law-to-be, Elise Ellington, 54, stood among her circle of diamond necklace-wearing socialites. She gave a thin, condescending smile and said in her shrill voice, "My future in-laws are a little too modest, aren't they? I wonder if he's comfortable in a place like this." The group burst into sharp, cutting laughter that stabbed straight into my heart. Elise always pretended to be polite, but I knew exactly what she thought of my family. Low-class people who didn't belong in the Ellington bloodline. My chest tightened with anger and humiliation on my father's behalf. I started toward him, determined to bring him to the family area, but Lacey, my bride, grabbed my arm hard. "Stop it right now," she hissed. "Just let your dad stand there. Don't make a scene. Today is supposed to be our day." I looked at her, stunning in her white wedding dress, but her eyes were cold, not a trace of empathy. I had loved Lacey for her strength, for the moments we shared joy and hardship back when we were just college students. But now she seemed completely changed, fully absorbed into her family's world. From across the room, my dad caught my eye and gave a small shake of his head, sad but resigned. It was like he was saying, "It's okay, son. Don't make a fuss because of me." He forced a weak smile, trying to hide his pain. My throat closed up, tears threatened to spill. My father had endured so much, and now he was still swallowing his pride for me. The ceremony continued in the grand hall. When it was time for the big family photos, I insisted on bringing my dad up on stage. "Dad, come stand with me," I said, voice trembling. He hesitated, then walked up, his old shoes squeaking loudly on the polished wooden floor. The bride's family immediately showed their discomfort. They stepped back, leaning away as if my father carried some disease. Lacey's younger brother, Marcos Ellington, a spoiled, arrogant kid, couldn't hold back. He sneered loudly, "Is that supposed to be a father? Looks more like a pile of country trash to me. And he's walking up here slow like a beggar." His voice carried, dripping with contempt. The whole group erupted in thunderous laughter. Some even patted Marcos on the back like he'd told the joke of the night. Lacey laughed too, not once looking at my father, not once trying to stop it. She just laughed, as if it were all harmless fun. I saw my dad standing frozen amid the roaring laughter, eyes red but still forcing a strained smile, clinging to the last shred of his dignity. Something inside me snapped. Rage exploded, burning through my chest. I threw the bridal bouquet to the floor with a loud crash that echoed through the hall. "I'm calling off the wedding," I shouted loud enough for every single person in the room to hear. The entire hall fell dead silent, then erupted into chaos. Whispers turned into a tidal wave of voices, every eye fixed on me, the madman who had just spoken those words. I stood there, breathing hard but with no regrets. This was my limit. The Ellington family exploded like a bomb. Chairs scraped loudly, shouts and screams fused into a wave of fury that swept through the entire hall. "What is going on? Why is he calling off the wedding?" Someone cried out in panic from the front row. Lacey, my almost wife, or now my ex-fiancée, went white as a sheet, then her face flushed crimson with rage. She whipped around to face me, eyes blazing, and slapped me hard across the face. The crack echoed through the room, a burning sting that left my cheek numb. "Are you insane, Clark?" she shrieked in front of hundreds of people, voice shrill as if I had committed the ultimate crime. "You dare cancel our wedding in front of everyone? Who do you think you are?" Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of heartbreak. They were tears of humiliation, of her perfect plan collapsing. I didn't answer. I just looked straight into her eyes. Lacey had once been my love, but now she looked like a stranger, fully part of a world I had never truly belonged to. Brantley turned on me, face purple with shame and fury. He roared, voice booming like thunder, "Clark Miller, apologize right now. You dare humiliate my family in front of 500 guests? Apologize immediately and save face for all of us." All eyes locked on us, the whispers growing louder. He jabbed a finger at me, face twisted as though I were the traitor. Elise stepped forward, her usually refined features contorted with rage. Her voice was ice-cold and venomous. "A low-life like you has the nerve to open his mouth and call off the wedding? Ridiculous. If anyone has the right to say that, it's my daughter, not some penniless nobody wearing a rented tuxedo." She waved her hand dramatically, diamonds flashing under the lights, as if to underline the gulf between us. The entire hall fell silent, listening. A few guests nodded in agreement. Elise had despised me from the very first family dinner, always hinting that I was marrying Lacey to climb the social ladder. The blood boiled in my veins, but I stayed silent, letting the anger fuel my resolve. Marcos, Lacey's younger brother, and his pack of rich friends charged forward like hunting dogs. "Get on your knees and apologize, you bastard," Marcos bellowed, face twisted in fury, finger pointed at me. His friends joined in. "Yeah, on your knees. Make it right for the Ellington family. Who do you think you are, warehouse boy?" Their voices echoed, a few guests even stood up, the atmosphere electric with the threat of violence. Marcos had mocked me at every family gathering, calling me his sister's servant. Now he wanted me on my knees to soothe his wounded ego. I stood in the eye of the storm, silent, unshaken, eyes coldly sweeping over every face, hurling insults without mercy. Not a single flinch. My heart pounded, but I wasn't afraid. This was the moment I had to be strong, for my father, for myself. My dad stepped closer, face pale with shame and heartache. He took my hand, thin, warm, trembling slightly. "Son, I'm sorry," he whispered, voice breaking. Me being here, it only made everything worse. I shouldn't have come. Don't ruin your future because of me. He tried to smile and shook his head as if to reassure me, though his old eyes still carried the quiet endurance he'd worn his whole life. I looked at him and saw nothing but sacrifice. Years of backbreaking work, raising me alone after Mom died. He never asked for anything, only wanted me to be happy. My chest tightened, years of bottled-up emotion rising to the surface. Tears threatened, but I held them back. Dad, I know what I have to do, I whispered, voice shaking. I spun toward the Ellingtons, rage erupting like a volcano. I roared loud enough to silence every shout. You can insult me, treat me like trash, I'll take it all, but my father is the one line you do not cross. My voice thundered through the hall, drowning out the jeers. The entire crowd froze, stunned into silence. Lacey covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Brantley stood rigid, face ashen. Elise took a step back, hand trembling. Marcos's mouth hung open, speechless. I stood tall, not shaking, face burning with pain and fury. My chest heaved, but for the first time in my life I felt free. I was no longer afraid of their world. I declared once more, firm and unshakable, this wedding is over, right here, right now. I will never trade my respect for my father for your cheap prestige. My voice rang out clear as a vow. The hall erupted again, but this time with shocked murmurs and even a few looks of reluctant respect. I turned to my dad, voice thick but resolute. You did nothing wrong. You're the best man in the world. Then I took his hand and led him off the stage, past hundreds of stunned faces. We walked down the aisle between the rows of seats, whispers trailing behind us like a breeze. Behind us, the Ellingtons' fury, humiliation, and chaos exploded like a storm. Lacey sobbing, Brantley shouting for security, Elise screaming about lawsuits. But I didn't look back. We stepped out of the hotel into the cool California night, leaving that glittering world behind. In that moment, holding my father's hand as we walked out of the hall, I felt an enormous weight lift from my shoulders. The air outside was fresh, carrying the faint scent of the ocean, nothing like the suffocating atmosphere inside. Dad walked beside me, steps slow, but his grip on my hand tightened. Son, are you sure? He asked quietly, voice full of worry. I nodded and smiled, the first real smile since everything began. I'm sure, Dad, and I don't regret it. We got into my old beat-up car parked in the lot, not one of the Ellingtons' limousines. The engine rumbled to life and we drove off into the night, leaving the wreckage of the broken wedding far behind. I drove through the night, the endless California freeway stretching out beneath the dim yellow streetlights. Inside the car, a heavy silence reigned. Only the low rumble of the engine and the wind whistling through the cracked window. My father sat in the passenger seat, head resting against the glass, his weary shoulders slumped as if carrying the weight of a lifetime of hardship. I glanced over at him. His eyes were quietly fixed on the darkness outside, filled with gratitude and worry. We were silent the whole way, each lost in thoughts too heavy to voice. My heart was still pounding from the tension back at the venue, but beneath it burned a dull, indescribable sadness. I had called off the wedding, walked away from a future I once thought was my dream. Yet why did I feel so relieved? Deep down, I knew this was the right choice. The images from the wedding replayed in my mind like an old film in slow motion. My father standing alone in the corner, the mocking laughter, Lacey's slap of Brantley shouting. They hurt, but they also pulled me back to the very beginning with Lacey. The truth is, our love had started out beautiful. I remember that afternoon on campus so clearly. She literally ran into me because of my honesty. Back then, I was just a broke college kid working nights in a warehouse to pay tuition. Lacey, rich girl, golden hair, radiant smile, was rushing to class and collided with me. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was running too fast. Are you okay? She laughed, then stopped and really looked at me. We talked, and that was the beginning. She said she loved how kind and simple I was. "You're nothing like the arrogant guys here," she whispered on our first date sitting on the beach. We held hands on the sand, listening to the waves. I told her about my dad, about our simple life in the countryside, and she listened with shining eyes. "When I'm with you, I feel like I can be myself," she said. And I believed her. Our love grew, from late-night texts to weekend getaways. But the moment I stepped into her world, everything changed. The Ellingtons never accepted me. From the start, they opposed our relationship, claiming I was beneath them, not worthy of their name. Lacey was the princess of the Ellington Group empire. I was just a warehouse worker from rural California. To them, I was a temporary amusement, a fling before she settled down with someone suitable. I still remember my first visit to their Beverly Hills mansion. Pool, manicured gardens, everything screaming money. I wore my best clothes, but I still felt out of place among the priceless furniture. Brantley Ellington greeted me with a cold handshake, then pulled Lacey aside to whisper something. After dinner, he called me out to the balcony, voice dripping with contempt. "What exactly do you think you can offer my daughter? Lacey deserves someone far wealthier. You're temporary." He pointed at me like I was a low-level employee. I swallowed the insult and stayed calm, but his words cut deep. From then on, every meeting was the same. My daughter needs a man with status, not someone covered in warehouse dust. Elise Ellington was subtler, but no less cruel. She kept up polite smiles when greeting me, but always found ways to humiliate. "Clark, that outfit is very casual, isn't it? Let me introduce you to our family tailor," she said at a party in front of her friends. Or another time when I mentioned my job. A warehouse worker? How interesting. But Lacey needs someone with real ambition, you know. She implied I was marrying up a gold digger. I endured it, for Lacey. But every comment left a scratch, making me wonder if love was enough. They even presented me with a thick prenuptial agreement to protect their assets. It was a stormy evening in Brantley's lawyer's office. The black leather folder on the table was full of complicated clauses. I would have no claim to any Ellington property. If we divorced, I'd leave with nothing. "It's just standard procedure, Clark," Lacey said, avoiding my eyes. Brantley sat there, voice cold. "Sign it. Prove you love my daughter for herself, not her money." I felt humiliated, like they saw me as a thief. My hand shook as I held the pen, but I signed, thinking love would make it worth it. Now, behind the wheel, I realized that was my first mistake. They never trusted me. And Lacey, she didn't either. Lacey had been so confident, certain that with her family's power and my soft heart, she could mold me into what they wanted. "You just need to change a little, Clark. Dress better, talk smoother. I'll help you," she'd say on later dates. She dragged me to high society parties, taught me how to hold a wine glass, how to greet people. I tried, for her. But deep down, I felt myself disappearing. She was sure I'd eventually accept my place, a dependent husband living within the boundaries she set. "Don't worry. My parents are tough, but once you adjust a bit, they'll come around," she'd smile, hugging me. But that arrogance, that blind certainty helped turn today's wedding into a disaster. She never imagined I had limits, that my father was untouchable. Now, driving down familiar roads, I wonder, does she regret it? Or is she just upset about the public humiliation? Behind the wheel, even with a heavy heart, I feel no regret. I know I did the right thing, the thing a decent man can never back down from. Calling off the wedding meant losing a life of wealth, but keeping my self-respect and my love for my father. That is what truly matters. I glance at Dad again. He's resting his head against the window, shoulders tired but eyes quietly filled with gratitude. He doesn't speak, but that look says everything. "Thank you, son, for choosing me." Warmth fills my chest, and I'm more certain than ever that today's choice was the only one I could have made. We've been through so much together. Mom's death, years of poverty, and now this storm. My father is my rock, and I will never let anyone hurt him again. The car speeds through the night, leaving behind the glittering lights of the ruined wedding. and the life I never truly belonged to. The road home to Dad is getting closer, small houses appearing under the moonlight. I remember the last time I was here before the wedding when he asked, "Are you happy, son?" I nodded then. But now I know what real happiness is. It's not mansions or luxury cars. It's this moment beside my father, free from fake chains. The car rolled to a stop in front of the familiar little house where my father had lived alone for so many years. It was an old wooden cottage with a patched-up shingle roof, a faded white picket fence, and a neat vegetable garden in the backyard. Warm yellow light spilled from the windows, greeting us like an embrace. I turned off the engine and stepped out. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of damp earth and leaves. Dad walked beside me, his steps slower than usual, as if the storm from the wedding still clung to him. We entered without a word. The door creaked in the silence. Inside, everything was exactly as it had always been. The polished wooden floor from years of careful sweeping, the worn sofa with scratches from my childhood, and the fireplace in the corner glowing red, the crackling logs whispering comfort. We sat down in front of the fire. Its warmth spread over our tired bodies, but it couldn't quite chase away the heaviness that lingered from the chaos of the wedding. My heart was still racing. The mocking laughter, Lacey's slap, Brantley's shouting, they all spun in my head. I bowed my head, hands clasped tightly, voice trembling. "Dad, I'm sorry. I dragged you into something so humiliating. I never should have let you come. Never should have let them insult you in front of everyone." Tears threatened, but I held them back. Then I looked up at him, voice steadier. "But I don't regret it, not for a single second. I'd rather lose everything than let them touch you." Dad looked at me, his old eyes gleaming in the flickering firelight. He placed his thin but strong hand, the hand of a lifetime of hard work, on my shoulder. His voice was low and warm, filled with a pride he rarely put into words. "Son, I understand why you did it, and I'm so proud of you. In the middle of all those high society people, you stood up for me, for what's right. Not everyone would give up their future to protect a poor old man like me. But you did. You proved you're a real man." He squeezed my shoulder harder, a gentle smile spreading across his face. But behind that kindness, I saw something else in his eyes, a quiet depth, as if he'd been hiding a secret for far too long, waiting for exactly this moment to reveal it. Then, unexpectedly, he let out a long sigh, as though releasing a burden he'd carried for decades. He looked straight into my eyes, suddenly serious in a way that made me uneasy. "Clark, there's something I need to tell you. I'm not the poor, simple farmer everyone thinks I am, and that you've always believed I was. I am actually a billionaire." The words rang out, clear yet soft, like a slow-motion bomb exploding in the quiet room. I froze. My ears rang. My mind spun. A billionaire? My father, the man in the old suit and worn shoes living in this tiny house, was a billionaire? I thought the shock of the wedding had affected him, that he was speaking out of emotion, trying to comfort me with some made-up story. I forced a shaky smile, stammering, "Dad, what are you talking about? You're tired, aren't you? Today was too much. Please rest." I rubbed his back, heart pounding, unsure how to react. My dad, a billionaire? It was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard, even worse than the Ellingtons' insults. But Dad just smiled kindly, completely unfazed. He stood up and walked into his bedroom, the small private room I was rarely allowed to enter. I heard drawers opening, papers rustling. Then he came back carrying a thick stack of documents and placed it right in front of me on the old wooden table. It was a heavy black leather folder filled with glossy papers and bright red official seals. "I want you to see this," he said softly, sitting beside me, watching my reaction. Still skeptical, heart hammering, I picked it up with trembling hands and opened the first page. It was a share certificate from a major tech company, worth millions of dollars. I turned the page. My eyes widened. International investment reports, bank statements with 9-figure balances, property deeds, beachfront mansions, luxury apartments in New York, even a small private island in the Caribbean. Every document bore my father's name, Benson Miller, stamped clearly by legal authorities. My hands shook harder with every page. I was speechless, stunned. The simple father who taught me to save every penny, who showed up to my wedding in worn-out shoes, was behind a fortune this massive? My head spun. The familiar world I knew had just flipped upside down in minutes. Dad, what is all this? How? I stood up abruptly, barely able to form a sentence, voice cracking as the ground seemed to crumble beneath me. Dad watched my reaction, a gentle smile on his lips but eyes deep with meaning, as if he'd been waiting years for this moment. He tilted his head and asked lightly, "So, you don't think your old man is just a crazy, clueless farmer anymore, do you?" There was humor in his voice, but it carried profound weight. I stared at him, mouth open, lost for words. My father? A billionaire? The thought kept repeating, making me dizzy. He gestured for me to breathe, to calm down before emotion swept me away completely. Then he pulled his chair closer and placed a steady hand on my shoulder, anchoring me to reality. "Sit down, son," he said, slow and firm. "From now on, I'm going to tell you everything from the very beginning about your mother, about the real inheritance she left behind, and about why I've had to hide it all these years." The firelight danced across his weathered face, highlighting the deep lines of a lifetime of endurance and sacrifice. My heart pounded. I felt as though I were about to step into an entirely new chapter of my life, one I never knew existed. All these years, I thought I knew everything about my father, the simple, frugal man who always taught me that life is about hard work and loving your family. Now everything had turned upside down. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Dad, tell me. I'm ready to listen." He nodded, eyes drifting to the fire as if flipping through yellowed pages of memory. His voice was slow, low, and rich with emotion, like a river flowing through the ups and downs of a lifetime. "It all started when your mother passed away," he began, voice trembling slightly. "You were only 3, Clark. Your mom, Evelyn, died in a car accident one rainy afternoon. She was driving home from the market and never came back." He paused, his eyes reddened. I could see the old pain still lived there, even after more than 2 decades. My memories of Mom are faint, a gentle woman with long brown hair who used to sing me to sleep. But they feel like faded photographs in a family album. Dad looked down at his hands. "I was destroyed, son. Those first nights after she was gone, I couldn't sleep. I'd just lie there staring at the ceiling, feeling like my life had ended with her." He looked up at me, eyes softening. "But then I looked at you, a 3-year-old boy crying for his mommy, and I knew I had to keep living. I decided to raise you alone. I never remarried because I was afraid you'd lack love, afraid you'd get hurt, afraid you'd think I'd forgotten your mother. So I stayed single and tried to be both father and mother to you." I listened, my heart aching. I had never known how deeply he had suffered. All those years he smiled at me, told me happy stories about Mom. Now I realized that behind every smile was unbearable loneliness. "How did you get through it?" I asked, voice hoarse. He gave a sad smile. "By focusing on you. I worked myself to the bone on the farm, saved every penny so you could get an education. But son, even though your mom left us too soon, she left the 2 of us a considerable inheritance from her parents." He paused, watching to make sure I was following. "Your maternal grandparents owned a small manufacturing shop on the outskirts of California. They left cash, several $100,000, plus old shares in local companies and some rural real estate. It wasn't vast wealth, but it was enough to build a solid future. After your mom died, I received that inheritance and decided not to squander it. I thought, this is the last gift from your mother. It has to protect you." My eyes widened as I tried to picture it. We had always lived frugally, eating homegrown vegetables, wearing second-hand clothes, driving that beat-up old truck. I never dared imagine that my mother had actually left behind a significant fortune. "So what did you do with the money?" I asked, curiosity burning. Dad sighed, a nostalgic glint in his eyes. "In the years that followed, I quietly taught myself how to invest, son. From the modest amount your mom left, I decided to do something long-term. I went to the library and borrowed finance books, The Intelligent Investor, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and stayed up late studying every night after you were asleep. I had no one to ask for advice. I just figured it out page by page." He leaned toward me, voice growing more animated. "I started buying tech stocks when almost no one believed in them. Apple when they were still struggling, Microsoft in its early days. Then I quietly bought up cheap land in the suburbs that nobody else wanted, holding it and waiting. I even put money into small startup funds, young tech companies I believed would explode in the future. It was all a gamble, but I had faith." He told the story in detail, eyes shining as if reliving those days. I pictured him at the old desk lamp, notebooks filled with scribbles, an ancient computer. "Sometimes I made huge gains," he smiled. "Like when tech stocks boomed in the 2000s. My account skyrocketed in just months, from hundreds of thousands to millions. I remember waking up one morning, checking the balance and nearly falling over. I thought, I did it. But life isn't always smooth. There were times I lost heavily, almost half of everything I'd built, like during the dot-com crash. I poured money into new internet companies thinking they'd change the world. Then the bubble burst and stocks crashed. I lost hundreds of thousands, left with barely enough to start over. Those nights I sat alone, wondering if I'd been too reckless. I listened, on the edge of my seat like it was a movie. "How did you feel then?" I whispered, hands clenched. Dad shook his head with a sad smile. "It hurt, son. I thought of you, of our future, and I was terrified of losing everything." He paused, then continued, voice slow but resolute. "But those failures made me more careful. I studied finance even deeper, reading the Wall Street Journal every day, following economic news, even quietly joining online forums to learn from others. I stayed up all night researching markets, analyzing charts, learning about risk and protecting capital. Finally, after decades of patience and steady steps, his wealth grew exponentially, from millions to tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. And now my father's total net worth exceeded $1 billion. I sat frozen, trying to process it. Dad, the man in old shirts driving a rusty truck, was a billionaire? "Why did you hide this from me, Dad?" I asked, voice shaking. He looked at me for a long moment, then spoke slowly, voice deep and heavy with meaning. "I hid it because I wanted you to grow up normal, Clark. I deliberately lived like a poor man. Old clothes, old car, no showing off so money wouldn't corrupt you. I've seen too many rich kids ruined by excess, and I was terrified you'd become like that. I only wanted you to keep your kindness, honesty, and love for family." He placed his calloused hand on mine, squeezing gently to emphasize every word. "If you had known I was rich, you might have grown dependent or arrogant. And I didn't want to lose you to the corruption of money. I wanted you to grow up on your own strength, exactly as I taught you when you were little." His words struck my heart. I remembered his lessons. "Money comes and goes, son, but character lasts forever." Now I understood why he was so strict about money, why we lived simply. It wasn't poverty. It was a life lesson. He continued, voice thick with emotion. "And today, watching you stand up for me in front of all those high society people, I knew my son had grown exactly as I hoped. You kept your good heart despite every temptation, fame, money from the Ellingtons. That moment made me decide to reveal everything. You proved you're worthy of the truth and of the power that comes with this fortune." Tears rolled down my cheeks. How much had Dad sacrificed to raise me, right? He handed me a small key, the key to the safe containing the original documents, and said, "I'm giving you full control of this fortune. Use it, son." Use it to reclaim our dignity, our justice, and everything we were robbed of on that humiliating wedding day. I trust you to do it." I hugged him, too moved to speak. That night, my world changed forever. I was no longer just Clark the warehouse worker. I was the heir to a hidden empire with a mission to make those who humiliated us pay. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sensation. My body was still that of the old Clark Miller, but inside was a new man filled with determination and power. My father's little house was no longer just a humble refuge. It had become the secret headquarters for our plan. We sat around the old wooden kitchen table, steam rising from cups of strong black coffee, and began mapping everything out. Dad, with decades of investment experience, guided me step by step. "We can't show our hand yet," he said, voice calm but razor sharp. "We have to stay quiet, son. Set up an anonymous investment fund, no trace of our identities." I nodded, heart racing with excitement. We immediately created the fund, named Miller Holdings LLC, but registered it through shell companies in Delaware, where the law protects owner anonymity. Dad showed me how to move money from his hidden accounts, and within days the fund had tens of millions of dollars ready to deploy. We began quietly buying up Ellington Group shares from disgruntled minority shareholders. I still remember those first calls. Through intermediaries, we contacted individual investors on the exchange, purchasing small lots to avoid attention. "Buy slowly, son. No rushing," Dad reminded me, eyes gleaming with seasoned wisdom. I hired a discreet financial team, freelance experts from small firms in San Francisco, bound by ironclad NDAs. They dug into Ellington Group's cash flows, public financial reports, supply chains, and deep dives into expense records. At the same time, we gathered testimonies from former employees who had been unfairly fired. I personally called them under a fake name, listening to their bitter stories. "Brantley fired me because I refused to hide his personal expenses," one said, voice shaking. "He used company money to buy gifts for his mistress." Those clues piled up like pieces of a dark puzzle. From there, we uncovered Brantley Ellington's financial misconduct. My team went deeper into the data and found black funds, untraceable money used for bribes, personal luxury trips paid from company accounts, private villa renovations. And the clincher, secret transfers to a young woman, clear evidence of an affair and kept mistress. I sat in the small room staring at the screen, hands trembling as I read the report. Thousands of dollars a month to her account, plus hotel bills and expensive gifts. "Dad, this is the smoking gun," I whispered, voice thick with rage. Dad nodded, eyes ice cold. "Son, now it's time to move." My heart pounded. I felt like I was in a spy movie. Nervous, excited, alive, we had become a major shareholder without anyone knowing, holding about 20% of the company through hidden accounts. When we were strong enough, we demanded an independent investigation into corporate governance and cash flows at Ellington Group. Through an anonymous lawyer, we sent a letter to the board requesting a third-party audit. "They'll never see it coming," Dad said with a wry smile. And they didn't. When news of the investigation leaked, probably from a disgruntled insider, the press pounced. The Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg ran headlines, "Ellington Group faces allegations of financial misconduct." Financial channels like CNBC devoted entire segments to dissecting it. Ellington Group's reputation tanked within hours. Major clients, corporate partners called demanding explanations and threatening to pull contracts. Employees panicked, rumors of scandal flew, and resignation letters poured in. I watched it all on my screen, pulse racing. "They're panicking now, Dad." The Ellington family reacted exactly as we predicted, furiously. Brantley raged at an emergency press conference, face purple, slamming the table. "This is a vicious smear campaign. We will sue whoever is behind it." He hired lawyers and private investigators to hunt down the mastermind. Marcos, the arrogant little brother, went on X and LinkedIn ranting, "This is economic sabotage by our enemies. Ellington Group will not fall." He posted nonstop, begging for support, but only got mocked in the comments. Brantley called an emergency board meeting, but the atmosphere grew more toxic by the minute. They sat around the polished table at headquarters, shouting at each other, clueless about who had triggered the investigation or which major shareholder was demanding it. "Who's behind this? How did we not know?" Brantley roared, slamming the table. The executives looked at each other in confusion. When the independent auditors presented their preliminary report, the dirty expenses spilled across the table. Black funds, personal charges, payments to a mistress. Shareholders erupted, pounding the table. "Brantley, explain this now. That's our money, not yours." Some demanded his immediate removal, voices shaking with fury. Several shareholders called for a vote of no confidence while major outlets ran non-stop coverage of Brantley's financial and personal scandals. Forbes, Ellington Group chairman accused of affair and corporate fund abuse. Elise and Lacey barricaded themselves in the mansion, too ashamed to leave as paparazzi camped outside the gates, shouting questions. Ellington Group stock plummeted over 3 straight days. I watched the chart on my screen, heart pounding. From $50 to $30, then $20 a share. Small shareholders panicked and dumped their holdings. Seizing the moment, our fund launched a takeover bid, offering to buy controlling shares at the fire sale price of just $15 each while the market was in chaos. Terrified investors sold en masse to cut losses, transferring ownership to us without ever knowing the real buyer. "They're walking right into the trap," Dad whispered, eyes blazing. Brantley desperately called old investor friends, begging for rescue, promising huge returns. But no one would touch it with the scandal everywhere. "Sorry, Brantley, your stock is too toxic right now," one old friend said before hanging up. He sat alone in his office, pale and sweating. In just weeks, Ellington Group plunged into a full-blown crisis. Reputation in tatters, finances drained, stock in free fall. Control was quietly slipping into the hands of the mysterious shareholder they still hadn't identified. Me, Clark Miller. I sat in my father's small house, eyes glued to the computer screen, heart pounding like war drums. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. Late-night calls with the financial team, sleepless nights poring over data, and now the killing blow was almost here. Dad sat beside me, his cup of coffee long gone cold, eyes shining with steely resolve. "Son, it's time we face them," he said, voice low and warm but full of determination. We had secured 51% of the shares through our anonymous fund, total control. After the endless scandals, black funds, affairs, financial abuse, Ellington Group had no choice left. They were forced to accept our rescue takeover offer. An emergency shareholders meeting was called at their California headquarters, drawing hundreds of shareholders, reporters, and business partners. The day arrived. We drove there, the salty California sea breeze blowing through the windows. My heart was racing, hands gripping the steering wheel. "Nervous, Clark? Afraid of something?" Dad asked. I shook my head. "Not afraid, Dad. Just excited. They treated us like trash. Now they'll see." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Remember, son, not blind revenge, justice." His words calmed me, but deep down the anger still burned. Memories of the laughter mocking my father, Lacey's slap, Marcos's sneers. This was the moment to take everything back. Ellington Group headquarters was packed. Hundreds of shareholders crowded the grand conference hall, whispers buzzing like a disturbed hive. Reporters from the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, even CNN lined up cameras and microphones. Major business partners sat in the front row, faces tense over hanging contracts. The air was thick with coffee and nervous sweat. We waited in a side room, catching fragments of the noise. The board secretary, a middle-aged woman we had contacted earlier, whispered over the phone, "Everything is ready." My pulse hammered harder. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff about to leap. Brantley Ellington appeared first, walking onto the stage with a strained face and dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights. He tried to maintain his usual authority, black suit gleaming, but his hands shook holding the microphone. Elise followed, attempting elegance with her hair in a high bun and diamond necklace, but unable to hide her exhaustion, sunken cheeks, red eyes. Lacey trailed behind, head down, hair messy, no longer the poised heiress. She looked drained, as if the scandal had sucked the life out of her. Marcos stormed in behind them, face twisted in rage, clutching his phone like he was ready to post another rant. The meeting began. Brantley stammered about a temporary crisis and recovery plans. Then the board secretary stepped forward and announced into the microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Anonymous Investment Fund, currently the majority shareholder, has informed us that their highest representative will personally attend to announce the transaction." The hall erupted in whispers. "Who is it?" "A secret billionaire," one shareholder muttered. "A hostile competitor?" another guessed. Reporters raised recorders, eyes gleaming with anticipation. The tension was suffocating. Everyone speculated about the mastermind behind the takeover. Brantley wiped sweat from his brow, face pale, forcing a smile. "We will welcome them and discuss fairly." The doors opened, and we walked in. I stepped forward first, Dad right behind me, our footsteps firm on the polished wooden floor. Instantly, many shareholders looked puzzled, whispering, "Who are they? Never seen them before." But the Ellingtons froze. Eyes widened in horror, then twisted into mocking laughter, thinking it was a joke. Lacey covered her mouth, face white as a ghost. Elise shook her head, voice shrill. "What is this? Why are they here?" Marcos shot to his feet, pointing straight at me, face crimson. "What the hell are lowlifes like you doing here? This is a shareholders' meeting, not your warehouse." His voice echoed with the same contempt as on wedding day. Brantley coldly ordered security. "Get these nobodies out of here. We're wasting time." Guards moved in, but I stood still, eyes sweeping coldly over them. My heart pounded, but I wasn't afraid. This was the moment I had waited for. The board secretary immediately declared into the microphone, voice ringing clear, "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Clark Miller and Mr. Benson Miller are the legal representatives of the Anonymous Investment Fund, the majority shareholder holding 51% of Ellington Group." The entire room went dead silent, as if doused with ice water. A few seconds of stunned stillness, then an explosion of gasps and murmurs. Cameras flashed nonstop. The sound of shutters filled the air. Shareholders who had sold to our fund went pale, mouths agape, realizing the people they had mocked at the wedding were now their new owners. "That's the father and son from the wedding," someone whispered. "My God, they've taken over." I stood there, staring straight into Brantley's eyes, a wave of satisfaction surging through me. Brantley turned ashen, losing control and shouting in denial, "Impossible! This is a conspiracy. A fraud. I'll sue you both." His voice cracked, face contorted. Elise staggered as if about to faint, clutching a chair, eyes glazed with shock. Lacey covered her mouth, tears streaming, unable to believe it. "Clark, how could you? You were behind all of this?" Marcos charged at me, fists raised, roaring, "You betrayed our family. You dared humiliate us in front of the world, you bastard." Security grabbed him and dragged him back, turning the hall into chaos, shouting, chairs scraping, reporters shoving for photos. I calmly stepped onto the stage, voice firm. "Our fund has completed the acquisition of the majority stake. As of today, operational control passes to me." I presented the facts briefly, how we had saved the company from collapse, our recovery plan. Many shareholders stood and applauded, nodding in approval. One even shouted in support. Reporters filmed non-stop, capturing this historic moment. Brantley made one last desperate stand, face purple, finger jabbing at me. "You manipulated everything. You destroyed my company. This is a crime." But I only smiled coldly and laid out the evidence. Black funds, payments to his mistress, irrefutable proof. "This is what you did, Brantley. I didn't destroy anything. You dug your own grave." The hall erupted in outrage. "Strip him of power. He can't lead another second." The meeting ended in pandemonium. The Ellingtons were stripped of all authority, Brantley dragged off the stage amid jeers, Elise sobbing, Lacey collapsing into a chair, Marcos restrained by security. I was officially elected interim chairman to thunderous applause. Clark and Benson Miller walked out of the hall under a storm of camera flashes, now the undisputed new owners of the empire that once humiliated them. In that moment, with flashes lighting up my face, I felt every burden lift from my shoulders. Dad took my hand, smiling with pride. But the journey wasn't over. This was only the beginning of their complete downfall. I stepped out of the Ellington Group headquarters building, the blazing California sun hitting my face, but inside me raged a storm of emotions. My father walked beside me, his hand gripping my shoulder tightly, as if to keep me steady amid the thronging crowd. Reporters swarmed like bees, thrusting microphones forward, questions coming in a torrent. "Mr. Miller, any comment on this takeover? Was this personal revenge?" Camera flashes exploded nonstop, blinding me, but I stayed calm and gave a faint smile. "Today marks a new beginning for Ellington Group. We will operate with transparency and fairness." Dad said nothing, only nodding at the press, his eyes deep as the ocean. We got into the car, the engine roared to life, and we sped away through the chaos. My heart was still pounding, not from fear, but from the sheer satisfaction of it all. That moment when I saw Brantley being dragged away, his face twisted in shock and fury. I felt the boulder that had weighed on me for months finally roll off my chest. But I knew this wasn't the end. The media storm was only just beginning. Within hours of the shareholders' meeting, the press detonated like a bomb. Headlines spread across the internet. Ellington Empire seized by mystery shareholder. Wall Street Journal. Ethical scandals topple a power dynasty. Forbes. Countless articles on CNN, Bloomberg, and more. They dissected every detail. Brantley's black funds, the affair, and my sudden appearance. The warehouse worker once humiliated at his own wedding is now the new boss. Social media exploded. #EllingtonFall trended overnight. I sat at Dad's computer, scrolling through the articles, a bittersweet ache in my chest. Overnight, the Ellington name had fallen from the heights of high society into public ridicule. I remembered the wedding day, how they laughed at my father like he was a beggar, and now they were tasting that same humiliation. "See, son," Dad whispered beside me. "Justice always comes, even if it's late." Brantley was immediately placed under investigation. Regulatory bodies, the SEC, the FBI, jumped in armed with the evidence we had supplied. The press exposed every dirty expense. Private jets paid for with company money, lavish bribes disguised as gifts, and especially the payments to his young mistress, barely older than Lacey. Leaked photos of their secret meetings surfaced, along with monthly bank transfers in the tens of thousands. "Brantley Ellington, from tycoon to fraud?" screamed the New York Times headline. He lost all credibility with the public and his partners. Former investors turned away. Business deals were canceled en masse. Elise faced a vicious backlash from the elite socialite circle. Former friends who once fawned over her now tore her apart online. "Letting a scandal like this happen in your own house, how shameful," one posted, and it spread like wildfire. Luxury brands, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, immediately cut ties and canceled charity events she chaired. Elise, the woman who once sneered that my father was far too modest, now hid inside her mansion, avoiding all social functions. Paparazzi camped outside the gates, snapping photos of her through windows, haggard and broken. Marcos, the arrogant little brother, had his old videos dug up, clips of him flaunting yachts and supercars while mocking the poor. "Country bumpkins like that are only fit to be servants." They went viral on TikTok and Reddit. He became a laughingstock. The talentless heir of Ellington Group shows his true colors. Memes flooded the internet. His desperate apology posts were drowned in mockery. He once called my father country trash. Now he was the one society had thrown away. I watched from afar, nervous, yes, but satisfied. Not malicious joy, but the feeling that justice was being served. Lacey suffered the worst public shaming. The wedding video of her laughing at my father was clipped and paired with footage of her sobbing at the shareholders' meeting, becoming a viral meme. From mocking others to collapsing in tears, life comes back around fast. Old friends abandoned her. Her Instagram was shut down from hate comments. The Ellington family, once California's untouchable elite, became the wreckage of a fallen empire. Society turned its back. The media dissected their private lives. Friends fled like the plague. Their honor was shredded. Every door of power slammed shut. No more invitations, no more deals. Only isolation inside a mansion that now felt like a prison. While the Ellingtons drowned in chaos, their reputation torn to pieces and their old system collapsing with them, I realized this was the moment to act, to save the company from the ruins they left behind. As interim chairman, I couldn't let Ellington Group go bankrupt. Thousands of employees depended on it, and I wasn't a destroyer. I walked into the chairman's office, the huge room with a panoramic city view where Brantley once sat in arrogance, and got to work. Dad advised from afar over the phone, "Rebuild it, son, but do it fairly and transparently." My heart raced with responsibility, but also with excitement at the chance. I appointed a new interim executive team, removing every Brantley loyalist involved in the misconduct. Directors who hid black funds, assistants who stayed silent. I fired them decisively in tense meetings where they begged, "Mr. Miller, please give me another chance." I shook my head. The company needs honest people. I brought in fresh ethical, financial, and audit experts from reputable firms. They entered with new energy, and hope began to creep in. I ordered a full top-to-bottom audit, every contract, every dollar. Late nights in the office under bright lights, my team and I sat around the table. "This project is bleeding money. Cut it," I said firmly, staring at the reports. I eliminated Brantley's wasteful vanity projects and preserved the solid foundations, tech and real estate divisions with real potential. My heart raced with every new discovery of wrongdoing, but also with excitement at the possibilities. This company can rise again, I thought, voice steady. I publicly released the full audit results to all shareholders, a move that shocked the market. Instead of hiding like Brantley, I held a press conference and stood at the microphone. "We are committed to transparency. Here is the complete report, no cover-ups." The stock stabilized. Investors called to congratulate us. The market began trusting the company again under new leadership, and I felt proud, not for power, but for doing the right thing. Employees who had lived in fear under the old toxic culture started breathing easier. In meetings, they told me, "Under Brantley, we were afraid to speak the truth." Some even stepped up. "For the first time, we feel heard, Mr. Miller." I held open forums, listened to their ideas, and the company culture shifted from fear to collaboration. My heart warmed seeing them smile. It felt like building a new family. The media tone changed too. A new dawn for Ellington Group, Bloomberg, rising from the ashes, CNBC. Clark Miller became a business sensation. Constant interviews, profiles praising the warehouse worker turned CEO. I smiled to myself, remembering when they looked down on me. Meanwhile, the Ellingtons were completely shunned by society. They barricaded themselves in their mansion, doors locked, avoiding press and former friends out of shame and total loss of status. Rumors spread they were selling assets to pay debts. Brantley faced prison. I didn't gloat, just felt justice. I stood at the huge glass wall of the chairman's office, looking down at the Ellington Group building, where they once laughed at me, despised my father, and treated us like trash in front of their elite crowd. Just months ago, I was humiliated in that very lobby below. But now, the entire empire was mine. I picked up the phone and called Dad. On the other end was his familiar, warm, deep voice. I said softly, still watching the Ellington logo far below, "Dad, we did it." There was a brief silence. Then his gentle laugh rang out. "I'm prouder of you than ever, Clark." The chairman's office was vast, with a polished walnut desk and a panoramic view of the bustling city, now my domain. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the stacks of papers on the desk, financial reports, new contracts, and plans for the future. I leaned back in the plush leather chair, took a deep breath, and felt like I was living in a dream. Just months ago, I was a warehouse worker who had been despised. Now I was Clark Miller, chairman of a corporation on the rise. But I knew none of it had come easily. After surviving the initial crisis, those first chaotic weeks of plunging stock prices and panicked employees, I threw myself into rebuilding the company with relentless determination. There was no time to celebrate or rest. I dove into the work like a hurricane. First came renegotiating strategic contracts. I reached out to the partners who had abandoned Ellington Group over Brantley's scandals, major Silicon Valley firms, investment funds from New York. "We're changing," I told them in video meetings, voice firm yet sincere. "Transparency is our top priority. Give us a chance to prove it." They were hesitant at first, but with Dad's quiet, razor-sharp guidance, I won them over. He called every night, analyzing the data. "Son, this contract has a loophole in the payment clause. Renegotiate it." He never appeared in public, but his advice was my compass. Thanks to him, we signed a deal with a major tech startup, bringing in tens of millions in fresh capital. I still remember the moment I signed that first contract. My hand trembling slightly on the pen, heart pounding with excitement. This is the turning point, I thought. And it was. The company began growing again. The first quarter's profit far exceeded market expectations, swinging from heavy losses to a 20% net profit. The stock started climbing from a low of $10 to $40 in just 3 months. The reputation that had been lost slowly returned. Clients called to congratulate us. Employees smiled when they saw me in the hallways. Business magazines ran non-stop stories about the Clark Miller phenomenon. The young man once humiliated by his almost in-laws, now leading one of California's fastest reviving corporations. I opened Forbes on my desk and saw the long feature with my photo in front of headquarters. From warehouse to chairman's office, the inspiring story of Clark Miller. They told my journey, from the broken wedding to the shocking takeover. Every article felt like medicine, exciting yet humbling. Dad read them over the phone, voice warm. "You've done well, son. But keep your feet on the ground." His words steadied me amid the whirlwind of fame. Once the foundation was solid, stable profits, loyal employees, I decided to hold a renaming ceremony, officially erasing the memory of Ellington Group. It was a beautiful morning in the company's grand auditorium, packed with hundreds of shareholders and partners. The air buzzed with anticipation, whispers, the scent of fresh coffee mixed with expensive perfume. I stood on stage, microphone in hand, heart pounding like the day I called off the wedding. "Today we close the past and open the future," I said, voice ringing through the hall. "From now on, the corporation will be known as Miller and Company Holdings, a symbol of transparency and sustainable growth." The applause was thunderous, endless. I looked down at the front row and saw Dad standing there, quietly watching his son put the final period on the empire that once humiliated him. His eyes glistened with tears, but they shone with pride, the old eyes now sparkling like stars. He said nothing, only nodded slightly, but that nod carried a lifetime of sacrifice. I choked up, nearly tearing up on stage. "Thank you, Dad," I whispered in my heart. The ceremony ended in cheers. After the renaming, Dad and I moved to a lakeside villa, one of his anonymous properties on the outskirts of California, surrounded by shimmering water and lush forest. For the first time, we had true peace. Mornings we fished by the lake, the gentle lapping of water, the smell of damp earth. Dad taught me how to bait the hook. "Patience, son. The fish will bite." Afternoons we reviewed financial reports in the spacious living room, sunlight filtering through the curtains. Evenings we sat by the fireplace talking about the future, global expansion, green tech investments. I set up an office for Dad, calling it the advisor's room. Big wooden desk, bookshelves full of investment books, and an old photo of Mom on the wall. "This is my thank you to you, Dad," I said, voice thick with emotion as I showed him in. You raised me from nothing and taught me that even when the world turns its back, we stand tall on our own values." He hugged me, voice trembling. "Son, I'm the lucky one to have you." Those moments filled me with quiet, overwhelming happiness. Life was no longer a battle. It was the peace we had earned. One peaceful afternoon, as I stood on the balcony watching the lake glitter under golden sunlight, the villa gate suddenly creaked open. The sound pulled me from my thoughts. I turned, and my heart clenched. Lacey stood there, face gaunt, hair uncombed and messy, eyes red from sleepless nights. She no longer looked like the heiress of old. No glamorous dresses, no sparkling jewelry, just a broken woman in an old shirt and worn jeans, hands trembling on her bag. She walked slowly toward me, looking so defeated it caught me off guard. "Clark, please let me see you one last time," she whispered, voice breaking as if expecting me to send her away. My heart raced, a flood of old emotions rising, not anger but a mix of memories. Lacey, the woman I once loved deeply, now stood before me like a ghost from the past. I stepped out to the gate, not angry, not hurt, just calm, like facing a familiar stranger. The lake breeze carried the cool scent of water, but the air between us was heavy. Lacey broke down the moment our eyes met, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "Clark, I've lost everything. Reputation, friends, status, all gone after the scandal. My family is destroyed. Dad is facing prison, Mom won't leave the house, and I can't sleep because that moment haunts me every night." She paused, breath shaking. "The moment I laughed at your father at our wedding, I don't know why I was so blind. Now when I think about it, I just want to disappear from shame. I'm truly sorry. I can't sleep from the guilt." Her voice cracked, eyes swollen. "I'm sorry, Clark. Not because I expect forgiveness or want you back. I know I have no right. I just needed to say it so I can breathe again. The guilt is eating me alive day after day." I looked at her for a long time, taking in every detail. Puffy eyes, ashen skin, trembling hands. My heart ached. I once dreamed of a life with her, beach dates, kisses under the moon. But then I remembered the wedding. Her careless smile when Marcos mocked my dad, the way she held my arm to stop me from making a scene. The pain was still there, but no longer sharp, just a healed scar. I took a deep breath and spoke gently. "Lacey, some things don't need revenge, they just need letting go. I've let go and you should too. I wish you a new life, one you truly belong to." She collapsed, sobbing into her hands in front of the lakeside gate, cries echoing in the evening breeze. I turned and walked back inside the villa without looking back, heart heavy, yet light. That was our final encounter, a closing of the old chapter. Dad stood inside behind the large glass doors overlooking the lake. He had watched the entire conversation but said nothing. No interference, no judgment. When I stepped in, he walked over and simply placed a warm hand on my shoulder. One gentle touch, but it carried pride, understanding, and the shared relief that we had finally escaped the shadows of the past. Dad and I walked out to the porch and sat by the water's edge. The lake shimmered in the orange-gold sunset. We didn't need words. The silence said everything. The evening breeze swept across the lake, carrying away the last echoes of that encounter. And in that moment, I knew. From here, a truly new life for father and son had begun. Just a few months ago, I was still Clark Miller, the ordinary warehouse worker humiliated in front of 500 elite guests. Now I am the chairman of Miller and Company Holdings, a corporation rising from the ashes. Yet as I sit beside my father watching the sunset, I realize that all these changes are only surface level. After everything, I have learned the deepest lesson of all. True wealth is not measured by money or power, but by the people who still stand beside you when you have nothing. On the day the wedding collapsed, when everything fell apart before my eyes, I had only one person left. My father. And that was enough for me to stand up, enough to fight, and enough to win. Dad was never rich in the conventional sense. He was rich in love, rich in quiet sacrifice. During those hard, poor years in our little wooden house, he never let me feel lacking. He taught me that a simple meal shared together is worth more than 1,000 banquets. And now, when we have everything, I treasure that lesson even more. I understand that filial piety is not pretty words. It is daring to stand up when your parent is insulted, daring to choose what is right even if it costs you fame, love, or your entire future. That day at the wedding when Marcos called my father country trash, when Lacey laughed along and did nothing to stop it, I chose my father over a fake marriage. I remember the moment clearly. My heart clenched, rage exploded like fire. I threw the bouquet to the floor, shouted that the wedding was off, and walked out of the hall with my dad. Everyone thought I was insane, but I knew it was the right choice. Filial piety is not kneeling and begging forgiveness for those who insult your parent. It is protecting your family at any cost. Dad sacrificed his whole life for me, raising me alone after Mom died, working himself to the bone so I could study, teaching me to be a decent person. He never asked for anything, only wanted me to be happy. And in that moment, I repaid him by choosing him over the cheap prestige of the Ellingtons. Now, sitting by the lake, I think back to those long nights after the wedding, driving home with Dad in heavy silence yet filled with resolve. I don't regret it, I told him, and he just nodded, eyes shining with gratitude. That lesson is carved into my heart. Filial piety is action, not empty words. It demands courage, and sometimes everything must be sacrificed. But the reward is peace, like this moment beside Dad with no regrets. The greatest lesson I learned is this: choose someone who respects your parents, because a person who doesn't respect your family will sooner or later stop respecting you. Lacey never truly respected my father. She saw him as an obstacle in her high society world. She held my arm and told me not to make a scene when he was insulted because she feared embarrassment. That wasn't love, it was selfishness. If she couldn't respect where I came from, she would eventually have despised who I am. I remember the Ellington family dinners, Elise hinting that my father was rustic, Brantley reminding Lacey she deserved better. Lacey never defended him. She just smiled awkwardly or changed the subject. I don't hate Lacey. I only feel sorry for someone who lost herself in her family's arrogance. There is no hatred left in me, only the understanding that forgiveness is also a form of victory. Lacey used to be the cheerful, strong girl I loved, but under her family's pressure, she became a version of them, arrogant, calculating, looking down on others. When she cried at the villa gate, I wasn't angry. I only felt pity that she had lost herself. She could have been different if she had stood up that day, but she didn't, and now she faces the consequences. I didn't seek revenge by hurting her more. I let go and wished her a new life. That is mercy, and it makes me stronger. Hatred only chains us to the past. Forgiveness frees us to live. Dad taught me that. Son, forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. And he was right. After that meeting, I felt lighter, as if the final burden had fallen away. For me, success isn't becoming CEO or owning a corporation. It's keeping my decent heart even when I hold the power to crush others. I have that power. I could have sued the Ellingtons further, exposed more scandals, but I chose not to. I chose to build, save the company, protect jobs, be transparent with shareholders. Success is looking in the mirror and still seeing the kind Clark uncorrupted by power. Dad reminds me, son, power is a double-edged sword, and I keep that blade sharp for good. I understand that the greatest revenge is not making others suffer. It is building a life so happy that they have to lower their eyes whenever your name is mentioned. I don't need to see the Ellingtons in pain to feel satisfied. I only need to live well, beside my father running a successful company, and let them hear the name Miller and Company and regret. That is the most refined revenge. The months with Dad in the lakeside villa have shown me that the most precious thing I gained wasn't the corporation or the wealth. It was the quiet moments we share at dinner, simple meals of homegrown vegetables and lake-caught fish filled with laughter. Simple, but far better than any fancy banquet, Dad says, and I laugh out loud. Finally, my advice to anyone. Don't fear losing what was never yours. The thing to fear most is losing your self-respect while clinging to what you don't deserve. I stand on the porch watching the sunset reflected on the lake, feeling every loss, every battle, every scar. And I know my journey didn't end with revenge. It began with a new life, free and no longer shadowed by anyone else's darkness.